Now, as good as it was, 2016 was not perfect. Fortunately, there were some albums that kind of didn't meet expectations, didn't really do so great, especially in comparison to all the fantastic releases that we actually received. So these are the top 3 most disappointing albums of 2016. Now, let me say this. These are not the worst albums of 2016. Some of these aren't even bad albums. They're just disappointing. They didn't do as well as they probably could have. They didn't do as well as we expected from the bands, or they just weren't great albums and kind of need to be pointed out for that. So just keep that in mind as I get through these top 3 most disappointing albums.
Number 3.
Number 3 is Green Day's Revolution Radio. Now, this album, I wasn't exactly expecting much from this album. The band really has kind of been on autopilot since American Idiot, really. They've released basically the same album. Let's be honest, they haven't given us anything that's been noteworthy or great or anything like that. I'm sure there's fans that love them still. I'm sure there's people that love this album and, obviously loved American Idiot and want more of that sound. But what we get is just a completely by the books for them. It sounds like a B-side of American Idiot. It's neutered. It just doesn't do anything. There's some songs in there that could be okay, but they just ruin them. And then on top of that, they just have this sense of arrogance and pretentiousness to them in some of these songs that just completely ruins it for me especially. So I really think that this album was not necessarily a horrible album. It didn't infuriate me in any way. I didn't exactly hate the album. I just really think it was extremely disappointing. And honestly, talking to other people who are actually extremely into Green Day and big Green Day fans, Revolution Radio seems to be a not so much of a great album for them either.
Number 2.
Number 2 is Bayside's Vacancy. Now, Bayside is a band I really, really like. I was really hopeful for this album. Their last album, Cult, was alright. It had its moments. There were some songs that were great, some songs that started off good and kind of fell apart. And I was kind of expecting something more in the long lines of The Walking Wounded or even Killing Time, which is probably my favorite album by them, actually. And what we got is just boring. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't strive to be anything more. It's just by the numbers for Bayside. It's emotional at times, but it really doesn't feel like their heart is in there. It kind of feels a lot like they're just phoning it in at this point. And again, it's not a bad album. I enjoy some of these songs. They're solid songs. There's nothing that's particularly wrong with them that's going to make you hate the album. It's just, it doesn't do anything to stand out. It could have been so much better. It could have been, we know they're capable of so much more, but Vacancy is just not that album.
Number 1.
Number 1 is Korn's The Serenity of Suffering. Now, I kind of had a hard time putting this on this list of most disappointing because honestly, this is not that good of an album to me. I did not like it at all, if you saw from the review itself. It wasn't horrible. It is a Korn album. You kind of got to go into it with those expectations there. I kind of grown out of them from high school, but I still listen to them. I still find something enjoyable about their music and what they're doing. It's just that there's so many of these songs here that really fall apart when they're supposed to come together. They might have great intros, they might have great choruses, they might have great bridges, but just the moments where everything's supposed to kind of explode or everything's supposed to kind of open up or come together, they don't really do anything. There are some songs on here where they are good, and there are good moments on here, but just overall, the album was just so disappointing. Their last album was okay too, but Serenity of Suffering really just does not do anything. Whether you're an old Korn fan or a new Korn fan, it's just not the album that you really want from that band. They are within the realm of that whole new metal, alternative metal style, whatever you want to call it. They are capable of more, and that's felt like it's more disappointing than anything else, because I know they can do something at least halfway decent for Korn, but they did not do that here. Thank you so much for watching the top 3 most disappointing albums of 2016. Let me know what you thought down below in the comments. What are your most disappointing albums for this year? And again, remember that these aren't necessarily bad albums, they're just disappointing.